Hello again. In the Northern Hemisphere, this time of year can be really difficult, sort of end of November, December, where you really want to get out and build up a consistent level of training, get into your routine. But the weather's getting, the days are getting shorter, or the daylight hours are getting shorter, the weather's getting colder, it might rain a lot more, and you might be experiencing snow. And on top of all that, it's the holiday season and the family commitments begin to bear down on us, and therefore there's potential for more and more disruption. It's harder to maintain a routine. So things get more and more difficult at this time of year. And also it's difficult to see next year. The events that you might be planning and you might have in mind to do next year are quite a long way off. You can't really see into the future, so it's hard to have the motivation to train for something that seems very distant. Basically, it's next year. So this video is about practical steps to create some motivation. And we can all agree that consistent training is really the best way to develop fitness. There's small increments building up on top of each other to make big changes. So you can imagine that if you don't train effectively during the second half of November and December, you're losing a lot of potential to develop fitness that you can build on in the new year. And you can see that from the visual here. So at this time of year that you can build foundations, working on things that perhaps aren't as specific to your event, but are going to allow you to build on the specifics later in the training year to improve your performance significantly when you get to your event. And because motivation is a lot really in your head, you're sort of physical, you might be thinking you're tired and you might not actually be tired. It might be that you just don't really want to get out and do the training. So think about what things you can do to bring these events in the future closer so that they feel closer and feel real. And what things can you do to make the training more interesting that you're doing now? Because a lot of winter training is quite repetitive. Training has to be repetitive because you apply a training load, you recover from it, and you apply another load that might be exactly the same. You recover from it, and in time your fitness builds. So think about what major milestones you might be able to achieve in the period up to the new year, and what minor mini achievements you can do. It might be weekly achievements you can do, or just the process goals of doing 5 training sessions a week, or doing 2 strength training sessions a week, or something like that, or eating properly, having fixed meal times that you stick to, and fueling yourself properly, or buying certain kit that builds excitement for next year because you know you're ready and you're doing things that are tangible steps towards your event goals. You can see the visual on the screen that shows some stepping stones. It's not necessarily a real example, but it just gives you some examples, and maybe drawing a curve and a graph, or a set of arrows, or a flow chart, or something that takes you towards your event can bring the reality into perspective that you need to be building your fitness now to have the fitness required to do the more specific training later in the year or the early part of next year, and then the event-specific preparation as you get closer to your event. Another thing is, what can you do in the winter? We talked about that in the last video. The winter can give you opportunities to practice riding or running in the dark if you're doing long distance, ultra distance events, and also practice if you're going to experience bad weather, if you might experience bad weather in your event. Certainly if you're doing an event in Northern Europe in April or May, then you could have fairly bad weather, and practicing this when you've got the opportunity to suffer some bad weather can be very effective. So what you're trying to do is create some momentum and maintain some motivation. Remove any barriers that are stopping you getting out. What can you do to avoid being blocked by poor motivation? Make things as easy as possible for you. Add some rewards for doing things. If you get out and do a good training session, you come back and have a nice cup of coffee or a glass of beer or a glass of wine or something like that. I'm not advocating drinking a lot of alcohol because it's not really that good for you, but it can be a nice treat and it's not going to do you any harm in very small amounts. So quick wins can be making sure your gear's all organised, make sure your bike's always ready for you to use, that no maintenance is required, so do the maintenance in quiet times so that when you do need to use it, it's ready to use and clean. Make sure all your kit's organised, get your winter kit out, organise it in, keep it clean and keep it ready to use for different environmental conditions, because the environment can change quite a lot. It can be very cold some days, it can be wet some days, or it can be actually very warm some days, up to 20 degrees even in the winter. So having different kit for different requirements and having it all in place and ready to use can be really helpful. Create a good routine and keep an eye on the weather forecast so that you know what the weather's likely to be and you can plan for it. I know some places like the UK, the weather's not very predictable, so the weather forecast might not be much use, or it is very predictable, it's always bad weather in some places. But in other places, like in the US, parts of the US, the weather forecast is quite accurate. So that's a really useful thing to have in mind and keep an eye on. Create momentum with small wins. Celebrate all your wins, all your successes, even if it's just getting out for that ride that was optional or something like that, or just even getting out for a ride or a run and doing that training session, doing the strength training session. Just have a little celebration at the end of it so that you maintain momentum and you keep yourself happy, keep your chimp happy. Try and break up the monotony with different training environments. Do some indoor sessions, some outdoor sessions, do some group rides, some solo rides, some interval sessions, mix up the interval sessions. And think about what works for you in terms of an interval session. Some people like to do the same training session, the same interval session on the same day each week. So it might be your 5x5 minutes to build your FTP with 1 or 2 minutes recovery. And they might like to do that every week. And other people like to mix it up. So you might like to do a fartlek some days, some shorter intervals other days with short recoveries, some longer intervals with longer recoveries on other days. And as long as your training focus is meeting your needs, it doesn't really matter how you structure your interval training. Don't get hung up on these magic sessions. Just focus on doing good, solid training consistently. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be something representative of what you need, and build your fitness day after day, week after week, month after month, so that when you get to the new year, you've had a really solid block of training and you're motivated to keep going and capitalise on that. And build a support system so that your family knows what you're trying to do, get them on board with it, get them to help. One of the athletes I coached, he got his daughter, if he had a big test, he had an FTP test to do a 30-minute time trial, and he had some tear off strips, and he got his daughter to tear a strip off every 5 minutes. So he had these 6 5-minute strips. She tore a strip off and encouraged him and took part in the process, and she was then engaged with building his fitness. So get the family involved if you can. Find training partners. If you can't find training partners, find a group of like-minded people. Our EBR clubs are really good for that. We've got a really good group. We get together in Monday for a workshop or a question and answer session. So that gives you a little bit of a social thing of like-minded people. People are in it with you, and that's really important to get through this time of year. Have a weekly routine, weekly goals, a monthly structure, and tests if that's what motivates you. Do some Strava segments. Give yourself a free day or something when you want to go out and just try some Strava segments. Make sure you're feeling good so you've got a good chance of improving. And we created this checklist. It's in a PDF form. You can download it if you want, and then, or create your own and edit your own things that motivate you. But it gives you some practical steps. It basically summarises this video with a checklist type format, and you might find that useful to keep you motivated. Make some comments about what works for you. Let us know what works for you, and let us know if we can help in any way, because actually having a coach, having somebody who really is in it with you and really cares about your success can make a huge difference. And now's the time, as I've just illustrated by the graphs, the visualizations, now is the time to get started for your events from next year. So get in touch if we can help, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.